Hello everyone, my name is Karel Zikmund, I work for Microsoft, and this is me being on vacation, by the way. I hang out with Edwin and Jonathan actually at Build, and we had some interactions over community on our CoreFX repo, and we figured that, hey, it might be good to do some dotNed meetup over here, and I'm doing one more in Prague in Brno, in Czech Republic, where I'm from. So, anyway, thanks for info support for organizing that. I think it's cool, and hopefully any of you guys enjoy it. So my first talk is about dotNed standard and what is it all about. So let's go straight in. So this is a description of some dotNed platforms as we have them today. The first one is the greatest thing in dotNed everyone probably knows, which is the big dotNed framework, part of Windows. And how you could look at that as kind of BCL is the base class library, which is basically the core APIs, think collections, data sets, and plenty of others, of course. On top of that are things which are kind of higher level, like WPF Informs, ASP.NET, which are actually application models. .NET is not the only, or .NET framework, the one from Microsoft, not the only around. There's a well thing called Xamarin, which is now already Microsoft again, built on top of MonoBCL. And there's, they basically support iOS, OS X as well, Android, and I think these days as well DWP. When I don't know much about history, but my understanding. So Miguel, if you watch this and I'm wrong, please tell me and overrule me. Miguel will not have time to watch this, I bet. But anyway, I think that MonoBCL was basically written as purely by contributions from open source community, and the .NET framework was its kind of parent, or call it the kind of specification. They build basically, .NET framework has this, let's build something similar, that behaves similar, it feels very similar-ish way. Later on, I believe they had was deal Microsoft Xamarin back then, and trying to reuse actually some of the reference source, and I don't know how well that went. These days it's actually much better. We're gonna get to that. There's another one, .NET Native, which if you do UWP, which is the UI for Windows 10, the modern UI, there's yet another basically .NET Native technology and runtime with its own BCL. Now, when we wrote when we created that, we didn't start over. Oh yeah, let's boil the ocean and let's start from scratch. We actually reused a bunch of the existing stuff, and I think that actually most of it is similar-ish to .NET Core, and actually was similar as well to Silverlight. So there was already kind of subset of the system. It was cross-platform, was smaller. That's how that thing was built. And greatest, of course, later thing is .NET Core, where we have .NET Core BCL, and we have ASP.NET, .NET Core, ASP.NET Core sitting on top of that. As you see, we have basically many BCLs, and that's what that's what I'm talking about. So if you try to do something like this, you basically have to learn 4 different things. The good news is that they were really similar. I bet that dictionary behaved mostly the same in all those. But basically, the idea is that they created from their own source code. Except for example, the .NET Core and .NET Native was actually primed with subset of .NET Framework, but it was still different code base, so flowing things back and forth was actually a little bit nightmarish. And it was actually pretty not fun to target for people, for libraries authors, to target multiple frameworks, multiple platforms. All right, so actually, this is the last one. This is what I described basically. Base libraries are down there, and on top of that, there are the app models. So how did the targeting of multiple platforms look in the past, or yesterday? There were things, so I'm talking about stuff that I didn't experience myself. I apologize. I actually, briefly among me, I'm actually 12 years on the .NET team, mostly on the runtime team. Only for last year, I actually switched to the BCL, to the CoreFX and that stuff. So I was not quite well versed in the what happened, in the API and BCL surface. But I heard lots of people complaining about BCLs, and you probably, some of you are among here. Yep. So there was not systematic, approach to versioning. And basically how it was created was profiles were created and computed out of the platforms and version of the platforms. that you wanted. So there were these intersections and those things, and the horrible pictures I've seen was like with like 5, 6, 7 platforms and just goes nuts. That didn't, work well. I think that Imo even called it that, we just didn't design it really well. I haven't been around for that one, so I don't want to say that. I'm just gonna quote Imo. And these things were hard to understand. So, what do we have tomorrow? So this is the first slide, and this is the great value and thing we have with dotNed Standard. We're basically taking the base class libraries and replacing them for the library authors with dotNed Standard. So that's kind of the common denominator that you as a library writer can target. This doesn't mean that Xamarin suddenly is built, or for example, their application model is built against dotNed Standard. It's still built on the mono BCL, but the mono BCL basically says that, hey, I'm implementing the dotNed Standard, and if you target the dotNed Standard, you can basically have guarantee that it's the same, and it's gonna behave the same modulo bugs, of course, on all the platforms. So what is dotNed Standard? dotNed Standard is a specification. It's a spec, basically. It's a standard. It's a set of APIs, and basically all the dotNed platforms you have seen, the four of them, and maybe in the future even more, that all of them have to implement that. And they actually implement more. It doesn't mean that they have to restrict them to themselves, right? Mono has probably APIs which nobody else has. .NET Core definitely has like roughly right now 100 APIs which are nowhere else right now. They're going to flow back into other frameworks, but each of the platforms in theory can go a little bit forward. Hopefully they don't go forward on the same thing in different direction. That would suck because they couldn't reunite, so we're trying to pay attention to that. But in principle, they can go ahead. Here are some of the versions of the .NET Standard that we have seen. So it started 1.0, adding by 0.1 up to 1.6. And right now we're working on the 2.0, which is really around the corner. Officially we said it's Q3, and if you monitor and look what's happening in the CoreFX repo, you might have eventually even hunch when it's gonna happen, for real. Let's talk about the .NET Standard a little bit more later. And the platforms, for example, is an example of the .NET framework, lots of versions. That's what we have seen all around on Windows. Started in 1.0, there was 1.1 side-by-side release, 2.0, which was basically then 3.0 and 3.5 was on top of it, kinda. There was 4.0 down to today 4.7. I'm not sure if 4.7.1 is out or if there will be, or whatever the marketing number will be. .NET Core is yet another platform. Right now we have only 3 versions because the 1.0 shipped, I believe, last June, July, something like that. So it's 1 year old. 1.1 was roughly in November, and 2.0, that's basically what we are kind of in lockstep with the .NET Standard 2.0 trying to finish. The important thing, actually, hopefully it's clear a little bit by now, is that when there's the new .NET platform version, of course it tries to just add on the previous version, which means that if it implements some .NET Standard, the new version implement the .NET Standard as well. It's not that, hey, I implement one .NET Standard and another, and jumping there and back. Basically think about it like OR is additive. It's like kind of a funnel, right? And I'm gonna show you a scary table, which now it's not so scary because it's empty. But it's confusing the hell out of everyone. So I'll experiment with this approach, and hopefully it's gonna be more understandable. So over here we have the .NET Standard versions, 1.0 down to 1.6, and now 2.0. And over there on the left side we have the platforms. I picked 2 which are the closest to me. Doesn't mean they are most important or anything. It's just that they are kind of, you will see that in the table they are kind of the more noisy and the ones where it's kind of a little bit trickier. So .NET Core, .NET Framework, and there's plenty of others, including Silverlight, UWP.NET Native, there's Mono, and Xamarin, iOS, and Android. Actually, I don't know what's the difference, but apparently there is. I didn't do that development, sorry for that. So let's look at one row. What this row tells us. This tells us like which platforms and which versions of the platforms support .NET Standard 1.0. So in .NET Core, it's .NET Core 1.0. In .NET Framework, it's 4.5. And you can hopefully read the rest. Now, what if I want to know about .NET Standard 1.3? .NET Standard 1.3 on .NET Core, it's already implemented by .NET Core 1.0, which means that .NET Core 1.0 implements basically 1.0, .NET Standard 1.0, 1.1, 1.2, and 1.3. We see that, hey, in the 1.3 .NET Standard, in .NET Framework, you need higher version, to get to that. And actually, it stays almost exactly the same for the rest of the things that we have over there. One more thing, 1.4, just to kind of show the example again, you can see that .NET Core 1.0, when it came around, I think it implements it up to 1.6, because like the initial implementation was like, hey, up to 1.6, but you see that actually the .NET Standard, like as it kind of evolved, it evolved as well with the .NET Framework. So the more APIs we added, like basically they flew some of them, not all of them, but the important one, the interesting one, flew as well into the .NET Standard. Or vice the other way, doesn't matter. There's, okay, one more version, 1.6. So you see, for example, over here, the .NET Core and .NET Framework didn't change. Basically, both of those versions implement 1.4, 1.5, and 1.6. I wonder why we have so many. We will see maybe later of the .NET standards. I think that it was like probably adding some more APIs to make it easier. So from that actually you can see that we can and we do version the .NET standard even without having major platform being upgraded. It's basically saying like hey, this set of new APIs that really makes sense. Let's make it part of .NET standard. Let's make sure that library authors can really target that and leverage that.
What's important to note here, I think, well, is that Windows Phone and Windows Phone Silverlight only support 1.0.
We're gonna get to the full table very soon. Yep. But good point. Here's another way how to look at the table. You can look at the rows and basically say like, hey, I'm on this platform, right? What .NET standards are implemented by that and that. So, as I said before, when .NET Core 1.0 was born last July, let's say, it implemented everything. It implemented 1.6 .NET standard, and by that you automatically get get implementation of all the older versions. In 2.0, we can implement 2.0. Surprise, surprise. One more interesting row, .NET Framework, and over here you see that almost up to the 1.4 over here, it basically grew up. Whatever we implemented more in .NET Framework. We as well added something to .NET Standard, and then it switched. Basically, since 1.4 .NET Standard, we're just basically extending the .NET Standard without requiring newest, like even newer .NET Framework. So it's already, basically we add things that are already there. We make them accessible and easy to target for library authors. All this is about library authors. And this is the full, scary, large, big table, which hopefully by now you understand and you can read what it means. Unfortunately, on the website, when you go there, this is what you see, and very few people really understand. It's like, what does it mean? In the past, we actually had pluses around, next to each version. That was even more scary for people. Even though that's the thing, right? If for example, over here it should be like, yeah, whatever is newer than .NET Core 1.0 supports .NET Standard 1.0. So it's 1.0. You can see, for example, on .NET Core, the 1.1 is nowhere here. What does it mean? It means that, hey, whatever 1.0 implements, as well 1.1 implements, because why would 1.1 take something out? We don't do that. That's stupid. And it's not as good as 2.0, so this is where it stops. So basically this table should read 1.0, or this row, 1.0/1.1 of .NET Core. Again, putting all that information in one table, very confusing for people.
So if you would be a Xamarin developer and you would be targeting all the three platforms, even saying, well, maybe Microsoft would still be something, then you would be stuck at 1.4 here, right now.
1.4, why?
Because the Xamarin
they implement basically up to 1.6, right?
Yeah, but only the iOS and Android. UWP.
Well, UWP is not Mono and Xamarin. .NET Native is something different.
So
that's
if
not
you
Xamarin.
would be a Xamarin app for Windows Phone, you would need... Well, it depends if you.
We would need
If you would
one
build
row
a
for
form,
that.
maybe
I'm not gonna speak
Yeah.
on behalf of Miguel. That's a good point. I don't know honestly. Like I didn't look at Xamarin much. I don't have my colleagues from Xamarin team here, so I'll dodge that question and let you ask offline maybe or something. Yeah. But assuming just these three rows, these three architectures or two, actually Android and iOS, this is what you would get. Yeah.
Yeah. Do that
All right.
now, so.
Last question.
I'm looking here because this has been confusing me for probably a year. Online it says on 1.5 for the dotNed framework it goes up to 4.6.2 and then it goes back to vNext and then 4.6.1. I never got that.
Let's take it offline.
Okay.
Let's take it offline.
Sure.
I tried to copy whatever was on the web page, and yeah, there's some teeny tiny.
Because now on MSDN it's different.
Yeah, you're very okay. Let's take it offline.
Sure.
This is the example how it should work, and there's always teeny tiny details here and there because one or two things didn't fit. So, to better understand that, do you remember HTML and HTML5? This is exactly the same. Imagine that the platforms are the browsers. I've got a couple of them: Internet Explorer, Chrome, Firefox, Safari, Opera. And then you have HTML versions. Actually, there was 2.0, 3.2. I didn't know it until 2 days ago. I think I knew about 4.0. There's 5, and there's actually 5.1 is since November-ish.
Yeah, something like that.
Cool. And they're working on even new ones, so hey, it lives. Great. Exactly the same thing. So let's look, for example, at HTML5. So IE 10 supported HTML5, and of course IE 11 as well, right? Because it was a newer version. Chrome 30, and it's now up to 58. Cool numbers. Same for Firefox. Apparently that was very similar, and you can read the rest. Hopefully I got the Edge versions right. Source is Wikipedia, please. Don't quote me as being on Edge team or IE team. I'm not. This source is really that and Wikipedia. So if that's wrong, I'm wrong as well. If you look at one row, I couldn't unfortunately find the information for the 2.0 and 3.2. But Internet Explorer 6 was the first one which started supporting HTML4. So whatever is lower than 6 didn't support HTML4. But an IE7 and IE8, which are kind of in between here, they supported only 4.0, maybe parts of HTML5. That's how you should read the previous table as well. So how this full table for HTML looks like? Question marks are things that I couldn't find online. So sorry. There's some number there, I just didn't know how to dig it out.
But then it says Internet Explorer 9 also supports HTML5, which is lower than 10.
IE9 supports parts of HTML5, so it doesn't support HTML5. So they were even like, and the same thing actually for .NET Core 1.1, it probably supports parts of 2.0 because maybe some new APIs, but not all of it, because we added a bunch of things for plus 9 months into Core 2.0. So yeah, there's no black and white answers on those things, but hopefully this helps you kind of a little bit understand. And for me, like actually, if you look at that, now I have to kind of explain more, like how to compare it, because I think that the kind of browsers and HTML versions are kind of, everyone knows it, right? Everyone did some JavaScript and HTML. Some people might not be proud of it, but we did that. So to kind of associate it with the existing platforms, .NET platforms, we could imagine, for example, Internet Explorer being the .NET framework. It's only on Windows, right? If we use Time Machine Go 2-3 years back, it's almost everywhere. Almost everyone uses that. It's the top browser, not anymore apparently. And it was actually widely popular and everything, right? It had its own specifics as well. It had more like, hey, this is IE only things and that stuff. Same with .NET Framework. There's plenty of APIs, actually even more than against IE, which are .NET Framework only, which we didn't bring to .NET Core, to Xamarin, everywhere. Right now it's WMI or, workflow and many things, which, pieces, I don't know. Some groups of people love them, but they are not there. Or they are only specific to that platform. They are not in the standard, so they go above and beyond. And actually, if you look at that, for example, Edge, you might imagine that it's UWP. It's again Windows only and .NET Native, but it's kind of the brand new thing that is cool and or cooler than the old thing. It works only on Windows 10, which is actually very similar with .NET Native, because I think some version worked on Windows 8. I'm again not quite sure. but basically it's tied to UWP, which came around with Windows 10, I believe. And Chrome might be, in that example, something like .NET Core, right? The cool kit, which is cross-platform, all around, mean and lean and that stuff. Again, doesn't mean that I'm saying like we're as good as Chrome and everything, but again, this is more trying to kind of give you guys, idea how to think about these things and the platforms. So hopefully it's useful. .NET Standard 2.0. So it has much bigger API surface, and it was basically extension of, we basically took .NET Framework, we took Xamarin, this was like pretty popular. It's like, okay, what's the intersection? How can we define the standard that makes sense and is already present on the two biggest platforms that were there, right? Because .NET Core was there, but we realized actually, hey, we are missing lots of APIs. So we said like, what people use in UI applications and everywhere. It doesn't mean that we took entirely intersection. I think that we threw out some things out because like, yeah, it doesn't really make sense. It's isolated. We're not quite sure why, Xamarin uses that much, and maybe the usage was not great, but basically that's how it started. And .NET Core 2.0, .NET Standard 2.0 are kind of friends. So how big it was? We added 20,000 more APIs, which is against the .NET Standard 1.x, which is 1.6 is the latest. So that's a lot. The key information here is that the total is now 32. So we really added, we came from 13,000, we added 20,000, so more than double, up to 32 APIs. The other thing is actually the .NET Standard has like really good thing, which is, which is handy and can bite you a little bit sometimes. Hopefully not too much. And the key thing is that actually, that through some compat shims and stuff, that we're basically allowed to target .NET Standard 2.0 libraries as well use the .NET Framework libraries. It's a little bit dangerous because the .NET Framework can use parts of .NET Framework which are not on .NET Core and elsewhere, but mostly it actually works. It works up to the 70% of the NuGet packages are actually API compatible. Like, so the API surface they use is part of .NET Standard 2.0. So you can ask, what's the remaining 30%? Well, that's the full ASP.NET. There's WinForms, there's WPF, because some libraries actually use part of that. So those things are not in .NET Core. That's, not that, but they are not in .NET Standard because they are not universal across all platforms. They are not present in Xamarin. And that's, I think, majority of the 30% remaining. There's still bits and pieces of things that we're working on. Drawing comes to mind, directory services, and lately there was one more which I forgot. But anyway, actually WMI seems to be a little bit popular, so we're thinking how to bring it over. Of course, if you bring over WMI, it's like registry, it ain't gonna work on Linux, But hey, maybe for people to move from the full framework to .NET Core, at least on Windows, it's valuable. So by saying like, hey, something is .NET Standard, actually registry is not part of .NET Standard because it's not really cross-platform. But bringing it over to .NET Core is useful, valuable for people to migrate. So this tries to explain that, what I said before, that with every new version of the .NET Standard, we actually grow. We just add APIs, we don't remove APIs, we don't change APIs, because it would kind of defeat the purpose of the spec. I know that HTML specs sometimes broke their promises. Again, in corner cases, I think that we changed a little bit, but I think actually no, we tried to remove roughly 100 APIs in 2.0. We got quite backlash from community, so we reverted and changed our mind. However, those APIs, throw some exception. All right, questions at the end, but okay.
HTML5 did deprecate a lot of older elements, right?
Yeah, that probably. I'm not. You do more web UI than I do, so yeah.
That's how they did that.
Yeah. Well, we're gonna get to deprecation. It sounds cool, but it ain't, unfortunately. And this is actually just table of to give you idea how much APIs grew. So from there you can see that basically there are 3 major jumps, by 30%, in those two things, and then now, which is basically, a coming from 13,000 to 32 with .NET Standard and .NET Core 2.0. The rest is like, either 0%, which means like 50 APIs here, maybe a couple of hundreds here, but it's not kind of like major, like, oh my gosh, it doesn't mean that those APIs are not important, they are, right? And especially for a specific set of people, but it's not gonna change the world and like double the number of APIs available. Questions at the end, please?
How do you count?
Huh?
How do you count the APIs?
Methods,
Okay.
as far as I know. So, which .NET standard to choose? If we have to choose. You have basically, well, it's a choice. Like either you pick lower .NET standard version, that's the NS, which means you're going to have reach on more platforms and their versions. Like the lower you get, the more, like with the 1.0 you could get down to Silverlight, right? If you remember in the table. The higher version you get, like 2.0, the more APIs you get, but less platforms. For example, it's, Jonathan mentioned, Silverlight until 1.2 or 1.3 doesn't support anything like that. So it's a trade-off you have to make. So what would we recommend? For libraries and library writers, and honestly that's, .NET Standard is for them, target the lowest version you're able to get away with. Which means you're going to have reach. Now if you don't care about reach, sure, like, bump up, go to 2.0, .NET Standard 2.0. But if you do, sorry, I lost my train of thought now. Never mind. Anyway, lowest version. So what about applications? The advice for applications is don't target .NET Standard because there's no point. Really, .NET Standard is about libraries. By targeting .NET Standard in application, you're not going to make it automatically cross-platform or anything. You do that by targeting .NET Core, which is the .NET Core platform. But the reusable code, which is library, or you can have it even as a project, whatever, like that's the unit that can actually span multiple, can span from your Xamarin, UI application to server side on both .NET Framework and .NET Core, maybe even the UWP.NET Native. That's the value kind of the .NET Standard. So for applications perspective, you don't care. You care it for your libraries. So what people do, there's a cool tool, or what we wrote is .NET Portability Analyzer over here, which basically checks either your project or binaries. It will check which APIs you use, and it will tell you, is it in this platform or in this .NET Standard, so we can know, we can do everything. I have a couple of screenshots. It has output in HTML, Excel, and JSON, and it's either command line or VS extension. So I have demo, hard-coded demo from from the VS extension. So I install it, which was pretty smooth. You just find the link, install it, and then in the right click on the project, which actually this is my project. It's like main project and one library. Actually, for this purpose of this demo, I moved basically all the logic into a library just to make the point. So it's not even a .NET, NuGet package. Suddenly you have menu analyze project portability. So if you click that, the left top corner appears, and there's, which is not great UI, the greatest.
What do you mean? It's great UI.
But it's helpful. So you click the open report, and in this case, the default is actually Excel sheet. By default, actually, it checks against .NET Standard 1.6 and .NET Framework 4.61, which probably back then the default are the latest, or for 7, I forgot. But either way, the point is that it doesn't even tell you the version over here. You can click on, we will see later on more things, and you get more columns, and you see like how many percentage of APIs are in that profile. So from library that I use, hey, 99% of that is API is in the .NET Standard 1.6. So I'm not quite ready to move to .NET Standard even 1.6. I would have to go to newer. That's not quite helpful on its own. Like, yeah, you see numbers, but there's detailed stuff in the Excel sheet. And that shows you basically the list of all APIs, which assembly, and for the two selected kind of targeted platform/standards, it tells me like, hey, on the .NET Standard, for example, SMTP client, by the way, it's supported by this .NET Standard 2.0+. And on the .NET Framework, which is the platform, that's not standard, basically .NET Framework 2.0 started, that's when it was introduced. That's what this line tells you. So you have breakdown of all your APIs, and you can even then like just, group scan like, hey, are all my APIs, for example, this one not supported. Hey, which one is that? Field type. So I have to go back, it's some Visual Basic part, check out what it is in my code. Do I care? Can I rewrite it to something else? And of course, if I have like a zillion of those, I might be not ready to move to .NET Standard yet. But this is kind of quick check how to find out. These are the options. So if you've seen in the menu, right after the .NET Portability, there's like .NET Portability Tool, Analyzer settings. And you can checkbox whatever you want, like which .NET Core, including 2.0. This is from preview of Visual Studio, which is 1-2 weeks old, something like that. 2 weeks, I believe, it's public. This is the default that we've seen in there. Because there's only one, they didn't put there the version, which was a little bit confusing for me first. And you can check off 2.0 and that stuff and find out what it is. And Excel, like which output formats, whatever you want. Pretty cool tool. The other way actually how to check that, hey, is something available in certain platform is APIs of .NET. Which is actually, it's a website that Imo runs kind of on his own. And it's pretty cool and pretty useful for us because you just type in the search like, hey, I want this API. And then it's pop up the API and you can kind of, this is like I cut out my part and you can see like, hey, where it is available. So over here, .NET Core 2.0, which means it's not in 1.1 and 1.0. This is dataset. And we could do the demo, but we're behind the time, so I'll leave it at that. It's pretty useful web page. The HTTPS certificate is now not working. Don't worry, we're not trying to steal your credit cards yet. So, recap of the platforms. Let's start with the oldest, The .NET Framework is the oldest. And 4.6.1 is not that old, but that's the first thing that implements .NET Standard 2.0. And as you have seen, the .NET Standard 2.0 is the baby which has like lots of APIs, seems to be really valuable. It's Windows only, it's machine-wide install, which means it has to be highly compatible, .NET Framework, right? We cannot break things, really. Because if you break things, customers are mad. Everyone wants like, oh yeah, just change this, whatever. I don't care. It's compatibility breaking change. But if you're on the other side and your application suddenly after Windows update stops working, and actually it stops working for your customer, not just for you, you're mad. So whatever the goes section .NET Framework, we are very serious about that. We have to really make sure that hey, is it compatible? And sometimes actually those discussions come down like, hey, what's the value? Because with anything, even one line, single line change, it can have unintentional, unexpected changes or implications. So like, hey, if maybe 10 people in the world will want that, it's probably not worth the risk, even if the risk seems to be 0.00 because it's one line change. Anyway, those are some difficult discussions and things we have to have whenever we change something in .NET Framework. And it's for the good of our customers. Otherwise, you would be yelling at us every release. We don't want that. You don't want that as well. And scenarios, basically all of them, right? The other platform, Xamarin, now I'm guessing again. I didn't check properly, apologize for that. But the .NET Standard 2.0 should come very soon, or is already there, somewhat on that verge. And it's for UI platforms, actually for cross-platform, UI applications for cross-platform. .NET Native is the, or UWP 6 as well, 2.0 will implement, that's what you're working on. Public promise is roughly Q4 with the Windows Creators update or something like that. You can find it actually on our pages. And it's basically UI only and only for UWP, which means Win 10 plus. And then there's .NET Core 2.0, which is something that we are really finishing. Promises in Q3. We are already in Q3. And that, what is .NET Core 2 for? It's cross-platform, so Windows, Linux, OS, OS X. Even though the Mac is really, is a real development scenario. I don't think that there are many Mac servers running on the back. So from that perspective, it's fully supported, but mainly as a development scenario. And the scenarios for .NET Core are server-side applications and console applications. So there's no UI or / client. You can do apparently UI on .NET Core with Electron combination, and there's Avalonia, kind of open source projects, and probably other things. But those are not come in the box from us, Microsoft. All right, how far are we? We're gonna run a little bit longer. So, 6 key values about .NET Core. First one, it's cross-platform. Some of you might care, some of you might not. Like if you have your applications only on Windows, why do you care about moving to Linux? Some people actually are already pressured into Linux because they're using other, parts of the stacks, other languages, and they won't interrupt. So yeah, for those people, cross-platform matters a lot. It's unified. That's what you've seen on the thing. So it didn't reinvent the wheel, start from scratch or something. It's basically, the BCL is similar, very similar to all other platforms, and actually it implements the .NET standard. So, you can reuse your skills. It's fast. Yeah, it's fast. So the Stack and Power benchmark thing that, we're trying to, or not we're trying to, there was I think certain things was pretty high up. .NET Core was pretty high up. We're still working towards that as well. And lately, actually, in the last couple or 2 or 3 weeks, there were 2 blog posts on .NET blog about performance changes we did. And let's do a demo. If I open it, it's going to work.
I hope so.
Okay. If not, then you say me.
Do you see your mouse?
If I find the mouse. Okay, I didn't. Okay, whatever. Anyway, if I encourage you just open that things, you can scroll down, page down, page down, page down. Stephen Taub did amazing job, documented everything. And there's little pieces here, hey, here, over here, 2 times faster in this little thingy. Over here, 10 times faster. Over here, 30%. And it's bits and pieces, and those are isolated APIs. So it's not that oh my gosh, everything is twice as fast. But the thing is that some of those APIs are actually pretty important because they are very low, they are used by many people, and not everyone will be suddenly faster, but that's how we kind of develop, deliver value. We're gonna flow some of those things actually back to .NET Framework as well. So if you're on .NET Framework and you're doing either ASP.NET or cannot do ASP.NET Core or using WPF or something, you're gonna get some of those value back as well. It's yet unclear, which of those changes are actually really compatible safe, so we're going to have to do more scrutiny and stuff. In .NET Core, we can actually get away with something, more, which is over here. The .NET Core is lightweight. So the .NET framework, the big .NET framework, is basically machine one installation. When we release new thing, it's pushed on all the billion to billions machines, or 1.5 billion, whatever it is. And if we break someone, it's bad. Or it can be even one important application. People are yelling at us. So it's really bad. With .NET Core, we're basically side by side, and each application opts in. So we say hey, I want to target .NET Core 1.0. Great. Some other application wants to target 2.0. Great. They have their own .NET Core side by side. You as an application owner have to say yeah, I'm ready to move to the new one because, for example, I like the improvements that you've seen in there. You have to basically move to the new one and you have to test it. It's up to you. Which, okay, more work onto you, but we're not gonna sneakily put something underneath you that might or might not break. That's the value or the lightweightness and kind of side by side. It's modern in the sense that it uses all the goodies that you know from .NET Framework, C# language, F# is there, I believe, yeah. VB, there's Link, basically whatever is everywhere else is here as well. And last one, it's interesting, it's open source. And some people are yeah, why do I care? Well, first of all, it's cool, everyone likes open source, or most people do. But the key value, at least I personally see from open source is, if you come to me and say oh my gosh, you have this bug, I hate it, I hit it every time in every project, it costs me so much, can you please fix it? I'm gonna turn around and say you know what, this is the number 2, number 3 report I got on that bug in last 10 years. You know what, yes, wait, you're in the line. You're not gonna like that, because for you it's the most important bug. It's open source. Jump in, fix it. You can. I'm not saying that it's easy. We're not making it explicitly difficult for you, but you have the option, which is great difference from the closed source spec. In .NET Framework, unless we do it, you're not gonna be able to get the fix. And especially if you don't have Microsoft paid support and things, and you're the most important customer in Netherlands or something like that. On the .NET Core, you can be a little guy. You're passionate, you want that, you can fix it. That's the great value of open source, at least from my point of view. We're done. Not too late, hopefully.
That's fine.
So, just a shout out to Imo. These slides, including the purple thingy, is basically his deck from .NET French. I probably added half of it. So if it sounds familiar, I stole it. I mean borrowed it with his permission, of course. Yeah, that's it. Thank you very much.